The widow Ching pirate. The author, who uses the phrase female corsairs, runs the risk of calling up an awkward image out of the now-faded Spanish operetta, with its theories of obvious servant girls playing the part of choreographed pirates on noticeably cardboard seas. And yet there have been cases of female pirates, women skilled in the art of sailing, the governance of barbarous crews, the pursuit and looting of majestic ships on the high seas. One such woman was Mary Red, who was quoted once as saying that the profession of piracy wasn't for just anybody, and if you were going to practice it with dignity, you had to be a man of courage, like herself. In the crude beginnings of her career, when she was not yet the captain of her own ship, a young man she fancied was insulted by the ship's bully. Mary herself picked a quarrel with the bully and fought him hand to hand, in the old way of the Isles of the Caribbean. The long, narrow, and undependable breech-loader in her left hand, the trusty saber in her right. The pistol failed her, but the saber acquitted itself admirably. In 1720, the bold career of Mary Read was interrupted by a Spanish gallows in Santiago de la Vega, on the island of Jamaica. Another female pirate of those waters was Bonnie, a magnificent Irish woman of high breasts and fiery hair who risked her life more than once in boarding ships. She stood on the deck with Mary Red, and then with her on the scaffold. Her lover, Captain John Rackham, met his own noose at that same hanging, and, contemptuous, emerged with that harsh variant on Aix's rebuke to Boabdil asterisk, "If you fought like a man, you needn't have been hanged, deal like a dog." Another woman pirate, but more daring and long-lived one, plied the waters of far Asia, from the Yellow Sea to the rivers on the borders of Annam. I am speaking of the doughty widow Ching. The years of apprenticeship. In 1797, the shareholders in the many pirate ships of the Yellow Sea formed a consortium, and they chose one Captain Ching, a just though strict man, tested under fire, to be the admiral of their new fleet. Ching was so harsh and exemplary in his sacking of the coast that the terrified residents implored the emperor with gifts and tears to send them aid. Nor did their pitiable requests fall upon deaf ears. They were ordered to set fire to their villages, abandon their fisheries, move inland, and learn the unknown science of agriculture. They did all this. And so, finding only deserted coastlines, the frustrated invaders were forced into waylaying ship's-aid depredation far more unwelcome than raids on the coasts, for it seriously threatened trade. Once again, the imperial government responded decisively. It ordered the former fishermen to abandon their plows and oxen and return to their oars and nets. At this, the peasants, recalling their former terrors, balked. So the authorities determined upon another course. They would make Admiral Ching the master of the royal stables. Ching was willing to accept the buy-off. The stockholders, however, learned of the decision in the nick of time, and their righteous indignation took the form of a plate of rice served up with poisoned greens. The delicacy proved fatal. The soul of the former admiral and newly appointed master of the royal stables was delivered up to the deities of the sea. His widow, transfigured by the double treachery, called the pirates together, explained the complex case, and exhorted them to spurn both the emperor's deceitful clemency and odious employment in the service of the shareholders with a bent for poison. She proposed what might be called freelance piracy. She also proposed that they cast votes for a new admiral, and she herself was elected. She was a sapling-thin woman of sleepy eyes and Carrie's riddled smile. Her oil-black hair shone brighter than her eyes. Under Mrs. Ching's calm command, the ships launched forth into danger, and onto the high seas. The command, 13 years of methodical adventuring ensued. The fleet was composed of 6 squadrons, each under its own banner, red, yellow, green, black, purple, and one, the admiral's own, with the emblem of the serpent. The commanders of the squadrons had such names as Bird and Stone, Scourge of the Eastern Sea, Jewel of the whole crew, Wave of many fishes, and High Sunday. The rules of the fleet, composed by the widow Ching herself, were unappealable and severe, and their measured, laconic style was devoid of those withered flowers of rhetoric that lend a ridiculous sort of majesty to the usual official pronouncements of the Chinese, an alarming example of which we shall encounter shortly. Here are some of the articles of the fleet's law. Not the least thing shall be taken privately from the stolen and plundered goods. All shall be registered, and the pirate receive for himself out of 10 parts only 2. 8 parts belong to the storehouse, called the general. Fund. Taking anything out of this general fund without permission shall be death. If any man goes privately on shore, or what is called transgressing the bars, he shall be taken, and his ears perforated in the presence of the whole fleet. Repeating the same, he shall suffer death. No person shall debauch at his pleasure captive women taken in the villages and open spaces, and brought on board a ship. He must first request the ship's purser for permission, and then go aside in the ship's hold. To use violence against any woman without permission of the purser shall be punished by death. Asterisk. Reports brought back by prisoners state that the mess on the pirate ships consisted mainly of hardtack, fattened rats, and cooked rice. On days of combat, the crew would mix gunpowder with their liquor, marked cards, and loaded dice, drinking in fantan, the visions of the opium pipe, and little lamp-filled idle hours. 2 swords simultaneously employed were the weapon of choice. Before boarding, the pirates would sprinkle their cheeks and bodies with garlic water, a sure charm against injury by fire. Breathe from muzzles. The crew of a ship travel with their women, the captain with his harem, which might consist of 5 or 6 women, and be renewed with each successive victory. The young emperor. In June or July of 1809, an imperial decree was issued, for which I translate the first paragraph and the last. Many people criticize its style. Miserable and injurious men who stamp upon bread, men who ignore the outcry of tax collectors and orphans, men whose small clothes bear the figure of the phoenix and the dragon, men who deny the truth of printed books, men who let their tears flow facing nor such men disturb the happiness of our rivers and the erstwhile trustworthiness of our seas. Day and night, their frail and crippled ships defy the tempest. Their object is not a benevolent one. They are not, and never have been, the seaman's bosom friend. Far from lending aid, they fall upon him with ferocity, and make him an unwilling guest of ruin, mutilation, and even death. Thus these men violate the natural laws of the universe, and their offenses make rivers overflow their banks and flood the plains. Sons turn against their fathers. The principles of wetness and dryness exchange places. Therefore, I commend thee to the punishment of these crimes. Admiral Colang, never forget clemency is the emperor's to give. The emperor's subject would be presumptuous in granting it. Be cruel, be just, be obeyed, be victorious.